I thought if I paid enough, they would finally see me as family. They changed the locks on the house I bought. I changed my heart and stopped paying the price. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. My mother's message arrived without warning. We don't trust you anymore. I replied with a single word, understood. 2 days later, their lawyer contacted me in a panic. That same morning, another message followed. My mother again. She informed me they had replaced every lock on the house, including the gate access code. We don't trust you anymore. That sentence stays with you forever. No matter how much time passes, it never fully fades. It showed up at exactly 8:14 a.m., precise and deliberate, like she had rehearsed it all night and finally pressed send. I didn't stare at it because I was surprised. Deep down, I had always known something like this was coming. I stared because of how cold and professional it sounded, like I had just been terminated from my own family. The world seemed to pause, giving me a moment to absorb the insult. I didn't argue, I didn't plead, I didn't explain. I typed back calmly, understood, that was it. What they didn't realize was that they had overlooked one very important thing. I didn't wait for their response. Instead, I opened my banking app and canceled the $4,800 monthly mortgage payment I had been sending for their house. The same house they had gifted to my sister. According to them, she deserved it because she had children. Apparently, all I had ever given them was disappointment. 2 days later, another message appeared, this time from a number I didn't recognize. No emojis, no passive-aggressive pauses, just a subject line written entirely in capital letters from a law firm. We have a problem. Please call immediately. I never returned the call. By the time that email landed in my inbox, everything was already done. But stories like this don't begin with betrayal. They start with affection, or at least the performance of it. They start with a child who keeps saying yes, believing that one day those sacrifices will finally matter. That eventually, someone will say thank you. That child was me. For years, I paid bills. I solved crises. I carried burdens that weren't mine. Every time they asked for help, I showed up until the day I stopped. That morning, they changed the locks. But I had already changed something much bigger. I used to believe I was helping. I honestly thought I was saving the family, protecting the house, keeping everything from falling apart. If anyone had asked me back then, I would have said, I'm just supporting them. I can handle it. But support turned into obligation. For nearly 4 years, I paid their mortgage, $1,800 every single month, automatically withdrawn like some kind of unspoken family tax. On top of that came utilities, homeowners' insurance, internet bills, and even emergency repairs after a storm tore half the roof apart. Everything was under my name, my credit, my money, my responsibility. Not once did they thank me. My sister, Marissa, was always facing a new emergency. Her credit cards were maxed out, I paid them off. Her car needed new brakes, I covered it. Daycare costs were overwhelming, I sent cash just for now. 3 years later, she was still figuring things out. And I never said no, not a single time, because I believed that's what family did until I realized that's what they expected. The first real crack appeared on a Sunday afternoon. I was waiting for groceries, scrolling mindlessly through Facebook when I saw it. A photo, Marissa. My parents, her kids, all standing proudly in front of the house I was paying for. They were holding a sign that said, "Home, sweet home." My mother's caption read, "So proud of our daughter for building a future we can all share. This home is finally in the right hands." I read it twice. Marissa's home, right hands. There was no mention of me, no tag, no acknowledgement. Not even a casual thanks to Jordan for helping. Just smiles on a porch I funded. The comments were worse, hearts, applause, praise. "She's such a strong woman. You're so lucky to have her. She deserves everything." Even my aunt commented, "Marissa, you earned every inch of that house." I didn't throw my phone, I didn't react. I just stared at the screen the way you stare at a bruise you're not ready to touch yet. A few days later, I called the bank. I just wanted reassurance. I needed to hear it from someone official. The mortgage was still in my name, but then the representative casually added, "It looks like a request was submitted last week to change the primary contact to a Miss Marissa Harper." My chest tightened. They hadn't completed verification yet, she explained. The paperwork was still processing. I hung up immediately and checked my statements. That's when I saw it. An extra $2,400 gone from my account. A transfer I didn't approve. I recognized the card number instantly. Marissa's emergency visa. I had helped her once during a short unemployment period years ago. I messaged her quietly. "Did you use my card again?" Her reply came fast. "Jordan, don't turn this into drama. We needed groceries and the kids needed shoes." I responded, "We were not sharing that card." She didn't reply. My mother did. "Sweetheart, Marissa is under a lot of stress right now. She said she'll pay you back. Let's not fight over a small amount." A small amount. When it's my money, thousands are nothing. When Marissa misses a bill, it's a family crisis. Then came the group chat. They had renamed it Family Circle. I hadn't touched it. Someone posted a meme of a man handing over his wallet with the caption, "Big brother energy, pay up." My cousin replied, tagged Jordan. Another joked, "Can you cover my student loans too?" Even my father joined in, "Only if you name your next kid after him." Gotta keep the sponsor happy. No one defended me, not a single person. I left the chat. They added me back. I left again and blocked everyone. But nothing compared to what happened that Friday. I was mowing the backyard, just like I had for the past 3 summers. My father always said it wasn't worth hiring help when I was already around. The mower stalled and I stepped inside for water. The kitchen window was open. That's when I heard them, my mother and Marissa, laughing, casual, comfortable. Marissa said, "Did you see his face when I told Aunt Karen the house was mine? He just stood there like a dog happy to be near the food." My mother laughed. "It's almost finished. Once the paperwork clears, he can't do anything. He insisted on keeping it in his name. That's his problem." Marissa replied, "Honestly, this is better. He's always been distant." Then she said the words that ended everything. "More like a guest with a wallet." And then she called her mama. "He's not family anymore. He's just a sponsor." I didn't move. I stood frozen, still gripping the water bottle, watching droplets slide down my fingers and fall to the floor. For a split second, it looked like blood. That was the moment everything ended. Not a relationship, not trust, an illusion. They weren't relatives. I was a funding source. They had no idea I was standing there. They didn't notice me step back from the window, but that sentence, those exact words, finished something that had already been cracking for years. And strangely, what replaced it wasn't anger. It was certainty. No screaming, no grief. Just clarity. They didn't expect me to attend the party. The invitation arrived in a stiff ivory envelope trimmed in gold, the lettering pressed so deeply it felt official. "Please join us in celebrating Diane Harper's 60th birthday." No handwritten note, no warmth. Just a line at the bottom that read, "From your family, 60 guests, a large venue, catered dinner, a slideshow." I heard people calling it a legacy celebration. I didn't respond. I didn't call. I simply circled the date in red ink and started preparing. 3 days before the event, I printed a document, $311,115.84. That was the total amount I had paid over the years, mortgage payments, utilities, insurance, repairs. Every entry had a date, a description, and a matching bank transaction. I saved everything onto a USB drive. The audio recording from the open window. Screenshots of the family group chat calling me a wallet. Photos of receipts. Emails showing my sister attempting to transfer ownership of the house entirely into her name. If she wanted the house, she could take the loan with it. That same morning, I sent a short message to my grandfather. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. The venue was exactly what I imagined. White tablecloths. Oversized balloons shaped like 6s and 0s. A projector looping childhood photos and beach vacations. Servers in black vests. Cousins dressed for cocktails. My mother stood near the entrance in an emerald gown, smiling proudly beneath a sign that read, "A house isn't a home without family." I nearly laughed. I arrived 15 minutes late on purpose. When I walked in, conversations paused. Heads turned, some faces lit up politely, others stiffened. Marissa spotted me, blinked twice, forced a smile, then disappeared back into the crowd. I didn't wave. I didn't greet anyone. I took a seat in the back. They wasted no time. Marissa stepped up first to speak. She talked about sacrifice, about love, about what real family means. Someone mentioned how this year had brought everyone closer. Behind her, the screen displayed a photo of the house. Across it, a caption read, "Built with love, passed down with intention." My name never appeared, then came the toast. My mother took the microphone, dabbed her eyes theatrically, and surveyed the room like a ruler addressing loyal subjects. "I'm so proud of my daughter, Marissa," she said. "She represents what legacy truly looks like. I'm grateful that this home, our home, will remain in the right hands." The room erupted in applause, smiles everywhere, until I stood up. I walked calmly toward the microphone. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight," I said quietly. "But since we're discussing legacy, let's talk numbers." The projector flickered. Then audio filled the room, my mother's voice. "He's not family anymore." Another voice followed, Marissa's. "He's just a sponsor." Like a dog happy to sniff the plate. Gasps echoed. Someone leaned forward. A wine glass shattered on the floor. I clicked again. The screen changed to screenshots. Tag Jordan. Only if he names his kid after the bank. Then came the ledger. $1,800 multiplied by 48 months. Emergency repairs, maintenance, property taxes. If the house now belongs to Marissa, I said evenly, then she also inherits the debt. I lifted the printed invoice. This isn't generosity, it's repayment. The stack was thick, 211 pages bound and stapled. Silence. Are you serious? Marissa shouted. Completely, I replied, unless you'd prefer to call it fraud. It was a gift, my mother snapped. Funny, I said, stepping closer. I don't remember signing a gift agreement. I remember signing checks. My father rose halfway out of his chair. I turned toward him. Would you like to explain the loan application you submitted using my name as a cosigner without telling me? I asked calmly. Because I brought that too. He sat back down. That's when the doors opened. My grandfather walked in. The room fell silent. He didn't speak right away. I stepped aside as he approached the microphone, surveyed the crowd, and finally spoke. You raised a thief, he said, staring directly at my father. And a coward, he turned slowly. You tried to bury your son with silence. But dirt never hides footprints for long. Then he looked at me. The trust is yours now, he said. The one your father tried to redirect, I corrected it last week. Marissa's name has been removed. A collective gasp filled the room. My mother's smile collapsed. Marissa's legs gave out. She grabbed a chair to stay upright. You want a legacy, my grandfather said, locking eyes with them. Earn it. He dropped the microphone and walked out. I placed the invoice gently on the gift table between wine boxes and old family albums. You changed the locks, I announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. I changed my future. I'm not your sponsor, I added. I'm your creditor. Then I left, no cake, no goodbyes, no glances back. The party ended, so did the lie. The next morning, my phone showed 57 unread messages. The first was from my mother. You humiliated me on my birthday. You turned against your own blood. Then my father, you're not getting a cent. I don't care what you think you're owed. Marissa, as usual, posted a black screen on Instagram. Some wounds are caused by those who were meant to protect you. The comments poured in. You don't deserve this. Stay strong. Family hurts deeper than strangers. None of them knew she had called me a wallet from behind locked doors. None of them had seen the invoice, but someone else had. 2 days later, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. Out of curiosity, I answered. Greg Harper? A calm voice asked. This is Philip Grant. I'm an attorney representing your parents. I stayed silent. They're not seeking litigation, he continued. They'd like this resolved quietly. No media, no online posts. In exchange, he said, they're prepared to offer a settlement. I leaned back in my chair. Let me guess, I said, half of what I'm owed in exchange for silence. A fair figure, he replied. Given the informal nature of the arrangement, I almost laughed. Philip, I said, I have every receipt, every transfer, every charge. I have recordings of them mocking me. I have their own voices admitting exactly what they did. I know, he replied, his voice tight. That's exactly why we're calling. Good, I said. Then this is how it ends. Full repayment every dollar. Or I file a public claim and submit the recordings as evidence. You have 72 hours. There was a long pause. Understood, he finally said. I'll be in touch. Exactly 72 hours later, the wire transfer landed. $311,115.84. Memo, reimbursement settlement. No admission of liability. The money didn't come from my parents, not from Marissa either. It came from a private business account registered to a name I didn't recognize, probably a quiet loan, or a favor called in by my father. Either way, that detail only made it more satisfying. I printed the confirmation, filed it. Backed it up 6 separate times. I didn't respond. I didn't thank anyone. I didn't acknowledge it at all. I wasn't there to reconcile. I was there to collect. A week later, I posted a video. Plain background, neutral tone, no anger, just facts. People like to say closure comes from forgiveness. For me, closure arrived via a wire transfer. $311,115.84. The price of 4 years of silence, obedience, and financing, someone else's version of a dream. They once called me family. Then they called me a sponsor. Now they could call it settled. I blurred the account details but left the total visible. This isn't about revenge, I said. It's about documentation, and documentation comes with proof. The video spread faster than anything I'd shared before. Therapists reposted it. Adult children from dysfunctional families shared it with captions like this is what boundaries look like. One guy messaged me saying it gave him the courage to cancel the car lease he was paying for his mother. I didn't reply. That same day, my father left a voicemail. "So that's it," he said bitterly. "You really think money fixes everything? You think you've won? You're not part of this family anymore." I deleted the message before it finished playing. They had changed the locks. I had rewritten the terms. Now I live in a small modern apartment with big windows and complete quiet. No family group chats, no late-night emergencies, no guilt disguised as concern. Sometimes people ask if it hurts to be done with them. It doesn't, because the truth is, I'm not missing anything. I'm free. Freedom, it turns out, costs exactly $311,115.84. People keep asking if I feel lighter now. If cutting them off gave me peace or closure or whatever word people like to use when they mean relief. The answer is simple. I don't feel lighter. I feel clearer. Calm isn't the absence of weight. Sometimes it's the presence of gravity, the steady feeling that you're finally standing on your own side. After everything, they disappeared exactly as I expected. No calls, no letters, no "we miss you." Just silence, not the painful kind, the confirming kind. The kind that proves I was never their son. I was a service provider, and once I stopped being useful, I stopped existing. 2 months later, I learned to love mornings. The way sunlight fills clean windows. The sound of coffee pouring instead of my phone buzzing. There are no messages asking for urgent transfers. No passive-aggressive, guess who hasn't called their mother lately? My phone is quiet. My hands are steady. I no longer wait for people to ask how I'm doing unless they actually care about the answer. Some people still say, "But they're your family." I nod. "Yes," I say, in the same way a cage can feel like home if you've never stepped outside. But I did. And the air out here doesn't require proof of usefulness. I don't tell the full story anymore unless someone earns it. Retelling trauma doesn't excite me. It exhausts me. So when people ask why I'm not close to my family, I just say, I stopped confusing access with love. That usually ends the conversation. I used to check old accounts to see if anyone had reached out. They never did. No apologies, no explanations, not even a guilt-soaked attempt at concern, just absence, as if I never existed. As if $311,115.84 worth of my life had been a clerical mistake they corrected by deleting me. Fine, they're very good at pretending. The worst part, they probably think I still care, that I'm angry, that I'm waiting for an apology, that I secretly hope they'll change. I don't. Once you see people clearly, you don't wait for the mask to go back on. You leave, and you don't check the mirror. People love the word forgiveness when they want relief without responsibility. But forgiveness requires acknowledgement, accountability, remorse. They offered none of that, so I returned nothing. My therapist once asked, "What would you say to them now if they were standing in front of you?" I thought about it carefully, and then I said nothing, because speaking would imply access, and they no longer have it. There's no spare key. No emergency contact, no shared accounts, no numbers saved just in case. I erased them from my life, not out of spite, but out of necessity. That's how survival works. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives with closed doors and a clean slate. Sometimes I imagine them telling people I abandoned them over money, that I was always cold, that I lost my mind. Let them. They need a story where they're victims. I have facts. Facts don't beg, they don't argue, they don't flinch under scrutiny. They simply exist, just like I did. Now I live, not dramatically, not vengefully, just living. I work, I rest. I laugh when something's funny. I eat when I'm hungry. Not when I'm invited somewhere just to pay the bill and be forgotten. Years ago, my mother once told me, "If you ever leave, we'll fall apart." She was right, they did, but I didn't. I'm not broken, I'm not bitter, I'm not waiting, I'm finished, not as a threat. Not as a lesson, as a fact, like a locked phone, a clean inbox, a number that rings once and reaches no one. No forwarding, no return, just me, whole and free. Thank you for being part of our community. Your likes, comments, and shares help us bring more unbelievable Reddit family stories every day. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a shocking story.